This is the summary for Lesson 5, Absolute Value and Order. In example 1, we'll be comparing absolute values. Which is greater, the absolute value of negative 5 and 78/100ths or the absolute value of 3? Well, let's see here. I know that the absolute value of negative 5 and 78/100ths is positive 5 and 78/100ths because that's how far it is from 0. Also, I know that the absolute value of 3 is positive 3 because 3 is 3 units from 0. So, we're trying to answer that question, which is greater? So we can see that 5 and 78/100ths is greater than 3. So the absolute value of negative 5 and 78/100ths is greater. So I'm going to write my explanation. I'm going to put the absolute value of negative 5 and 78/100ths is greater because the absolute value of negative 5 and 78/100ths equals 5 and 78/100ths. The absolute value of 3 is 3, and 5 and 78/100ths is greater than 3. Finally, we have to write an inequality statement to compare the numbers above. So we can write our inequality as the absolute value of negative 5 and 78/100ths is greater than the absolute value of 3.
Example number 2, comparing absolute values. Which is smaller, the absolute value of negative 13 or the absolute value of negative 9? So let's go ahead and compare them. Well, the absolute value of negative 13, the distance between 0 and negative 13 is 13. The absolute value of negative 9, in other words, the distance between 0 and negative 9, is 9. So which one is smaller? Well, let's compare 13 and 9. I know that 9 is smaller. Therefore, the absolute value of negative 9 is smaller than the absolute value of negative 13. So the absolute value of negative 9 is smaller. Explain how you determine your answer. We can say the absolute value of negative 9 is smaller because the absolute value of negative 13 is equal to 13. The absolute value of negative 9 is 9. And 13 is greater than 9. If 13 is greater than 9, that means 9 is smaller than 13. So let's write an inequality statement to compare the numbers above. We can say that the absolute value of negative 13 is greater than the absolute value of negative 9. Another way we can write this is by saying the absolute value of negative 9 is less than the absolute value of negative 13.